Welcome everyone to MailFuzz TV. I am Peter and today I'm going to be talking about Miss Marvel Episode 1, the new Marvel Cinematic Universe series from Disney+. This was high on the pilot Patreon tier vote. So yeah, this is a teenage superhero, a Muslim teenage superhero that I have read some of the comics of. I've not read a ton, but I've read like the first, I want to say like maybe 3 arcs of the original Kamala Khan, Miss Marvel stories by G. Willow Wilson. And I've seen her pop up elsewhere. But so I'm a little familiar with the character. Like I have a sense of what the vibe of the comic is, and like some of the changes they've made to her power set and things like that. But this is the new limited series, potentially with more seasons, because they're very vague about this with a lot of the Marvel shows on Disney+. But we know she's going to pop up in the Marvels movie with Captain Marvel, who of course is going to be mentioned a lot in the show, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But this is a new teenage superhero with a very distinct personality, and I don't just mean her specifically. She does have a personality, but more the show itself and the way it's told has a distinct personality. It's very colorful. There's a lot of sort of animation, especially in the background, and things like billboards and things like anything in the background that can have writing or drawings on it might be animated and have like some extra things that are going on in her head sort of in the background. That's one of the stylistic touches that are on the show. And you got a vibe like that from the trailers, I think. So yeah, going into this, I was kind of in a fairly optimistic place, despite the fact that I've not been super excited by most of Marvel's stuff recently, and despite the fact that I've been disappointed even with the Disney Plus Marvel shows that I liked at the start. A lot of them kind of floundered. I mean, most of them I didn't even like that much at the start. I mean, I'm thinking WandaVision I liked for quite a bit, and then it kind of went off a cliff. Cliff's maybe a bit harsh, but it went down towards the end into a bit more generic territory. And I think there's a lot of promising things in Miss Marvel Episode 1. And there's a lot of things I like about it. I think the first thing, and I'm starting spoiler free here, before I get to any spoilers, if there is any to really talk about, to be honest, I don't know if there is. Because this episode is purely just like set up. This episode doesn't even introduce really like a villain or anything like that, or any kind of big plot stuff. This is purely an introduction to this character, her family, her friends, her hopes, dreams, and just like kind of like obviously her first getting her powers. Like that is what happens in this episode. There is no big things to spoil other than maybe a little touches and how it does certain things. But I'll start spoiler free, and I'll warn you if I do go into anything that I do feel is spoiler later on. So yeah, first things first. Like this is a very good first episode, and I think the thing that's very good about it, first and foremost, is the casting, in particular of the lead character. I think I'll just get her name here. Iman Vellani, who plays Kamala Khan, is perfect for this role. And it's not so much that she's necessarily perfect from what I remember from the comic book, although I'm not saying she's not. I'm just saying, like, I'm not saying that specifically. I'm saying she's perfect for the tone and the vibe that this show is going for. She's likable, she's got a lot of charisma, and kind of that awkward teen way, and she's funny. And I think more than anything, what stuck out to me as I was watching the show, and she's interacting with other characters who are fairly well cast. I think her parents are really well cast as well. Her mother's a very frustrating character and a very believable, like well-meaning but frustrating as hell way. So you get that from her, and her dad's kind of like playing the nicer cop of the parents, but obviously still has to kind of back up the mom, and like the dynamics are really solid, right? It's knowing what it's doing there. But what stuck out to me is whether she was with her parents, especially her mother, who is quite a big character, very loud character. And I don't just mean because she speaks loudly, I mean she's loud and like personality. And whether she's with her friend Bruno, who's solid enough for what he is, or whoever she's with, she always is the center of the scene. She's I don't want to say she steals the scene, because it would be stealing the scene if any of the other characters stole it from her, right? She's the lead character, right? This is very much a show that has a central character and everyone else is supporting. This is not an ensemble. And that's cool, that's what it is. But often what happens in a lot of shows like that is you tend to end up getting some other characters who are become more fan favorites, and that may still happen over time, obviously. But in episode 1, she is the center of every scene, and we care about her, I think, more in every scene than anyone else in the scene she's with. And every scene is about her and about what she's going through. She might literally be in every single scene. I think I'm struggling to think in my head of a single scene she's not in. And it's very much her. It's what she wants to do. The plot of the first episode revolves around her wanting to go to Avengers Con, which is the first ever Avengers convention, and she wants to go with her friend Bruno. And the episode is really just about her working up the courage to ask her mother to take her, and if she's allowed to go. And then when that doesn't necessarily go so well, about how she's going to get there anyway, with some teenage trickery and hijinks. So, I mean, that's the first episode. That is what it is. Obviously, it raises a lot of ideas. It does a good job of showing how she feels different compared to her parents and what her mother especially expects of her, and like the culture she's in. You know, it doesn't shy away from her, her neighborhood, from her family life, from her religious upbringing. There's a sequence where she goes out with her mother to do like just various chores, but it's basically just out shopping, and like just you get a sort of like a little bit of the culture just from this montage. You know, they're going to stop to get food at one point. You get like a bit of a vibe, and then her mother runs into someone she knows, right? And they start complaining about this other girl who decided not to get married, and Kamala kind of says, "Oh, good for her. She wanted to go and travel the world and didn't want to just immediately get settled down." And that's like, they look at her like she's a villain for saying that, and like, "Oh, you're going to end up a troublemaker. You're not going to have a ring on your finger." Like, that's kind of the vibe you get from that scene, and that's kind of there throughout, right? There's lots of these little things to show that she doesn't necessarily think the same way her more traditional parents, and especially her mother. Her mother is very opinionated. Her mother has very solid ideas for what she wants for her daughter. She's very strict about what her daughter's going to wear. If she does go to this convention, she doesn't want to wear anything skimpy. And the Captain, or sorry, the Miss Marvel, or no, the Captain Marvel. I was right the first time. The Captain Marvel outfit that she's going to wear because she wants to win a cosplay competition is like there's nothing remotely skimpy about it, but you get this kind of this level of frustration. But I think what it does as well is it doesn't villainize the mother. I think that's important. I do find her frustrating, because I naturally find people like this frustrating, but it's not because she's evil. It's not because she is malicious. It's she does believe she has her daughter's best intentions at heart, and when Kamala does maybe go a little too far when she's like speaking to her parents or rebelling against them or whatever, and it kind of hurts them a little bit, like you actually do feel it, and you feel a little bit sorry for them. That you understand why Kamala's sort of erupted like this. You understand why she's gotten to that point, but and that's a sign of, while like we very much have our main character, it's a sign of pretty solid characterization for the other characters, that I don't immediately just villainize them compared to the central character when they're in the way of the central character. So I think that's very strong. But it really is like the casting like completely elevates this show. It's not the only good thing. There's good stylistic things. I mentioned, the opening of the episode is this animation. The idea that Kamala is this big fan who makes like fan videos and fan shorts out of animation for YouTube, and I chuckled that she only had 5 views and things, little details like that. But she, the opening of this episode is you've got blinding lights playing, which was in the trailer as well. It's very upbeat. It's got a lot of energy, and that really is there for certainly the early chunk of the episode. If I have any like critiques from a pacing perspective, is that it does feel like it maybe, I don't want to say it slows down, because that's not fair. It kind of has to slow down to a point, but like there's definitely maybe little pockets where that feeling of energy is a little missing. But like that's a minor quibble, because there's definitely times where it comes back. There's a sequence in the middle when she's describing like her plan to do something, and it's kind of like it's not a heist, but like it'd be like in a heist movie when they're describing the plan they're going to do, and we're kind of like seeing it all visualized, and Like it kind of like comes back in ways like that as the episode goes on, and it has some humor in the fact that, you know, here's what the plan is, and then here's how it actually goes afterwards, and naturally it's not as cool or or as effortless as the description of the plan made it sound. But yeah, so obviously that stylistic touch and the animation that they've got, and you know, things like the slight kind of almost GIF effect on some of the writing, like on, say, the boards in the classroom when she's thinking about stuff or whatever else. That's great stylistic touch. It gives it a bit of a personality as a show. But the crowning thing here is the casting. Like, they cast the perfect actor in the lead role, and she's written exactly as she should be, to win over the audience, to be charming, to be funny, to be sympathetic, but have the ability to like be a little bit of a whiny teenager when it kind of like naturally gets to that point with their parents, and you can kind of say with their parents a little bit. At least if you're over a certain age, you probably will. So, full marks on that. Full marks on that, right? So, as far as promising first episodes go for just liking the world that you're in and liking the characters that you're in, that you're with, good start. Alternatively, if you want to like play devil's advocate, you could say, is it a problem that it doesn't really set up anything else in this episode? You know, it's got the Marvel Easter eggs and stuff. You know, at one point she opens her podcast app and like you see like Easter eggs to like various characters and things like that. You see this like Avengers con and there's a bunch of like weird jokey things around in that. You know, it doesn't set up a villain. As far as maybe there's like a seed for a villain with some of the other like another kid or something like that, but there was definitely nothing I noticed that felt like this is the villain plot that we're going to build up. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm not even saying that's a critique necessarily. I'm just sort of like offering it as a devil's advocate and saying, is that something that maybe is a concern that you don't do in the first episode? Is this an example of streaming services kind of not necessarily obeying some of the rules when it comes to TV writing, because they're like, well, they're going to watch the next one anyway? There's kind of almost like an arrogance there, which is fine in this case because, like, one, it's true, but like, two, if it's good, it doesn't really matter ultimately if you've not necessarily done all, you know, you've not ticked all the boxes necessarily. I suppose the big thing that like fans of the character might talk about is anything remotely worth debating over is the change of her powers, right? So in the comics, Miss Marvel has powers just like Mr. Fantastic. She is stretchy. She can make her hand go big. She can make her whole body go big. She can do all the Mr. Fantastic type stuff. And she's also an Inhuman, which I understand why she's not an Inhuman in the movie universe, because they tried the Inhumans TV show and it was a disaster in every conceivable level. And it feels like now that they've got the X-Men rights back, they don't care to dabble with Inhumans. But her powers themselves have also changed. Now, it does seem like she's going to still do similar things with her powers, in that it's a little Green Lantern-y, in that she has this bracelet that can make, you know, like, it's basically, it just creates energy, like light energy, but she can make shapes out of it. So, you know, like, it's not in this first episode, but in the trailer, she still does make a big fist with that. So it kind of still mimics the power from the comic, but it's still very different. And there's, you know, just various, like, you know, but there's more, like, blasting she could probably do versus what she could do in the comic. So there's definitely some other applications that weren't there before with her original power set. As far as this change goes, it's like her just getting this bracelet kind of like randomly. Now there may be some cool things they do with the backstory to this, because it appears in the first episode that it's something that her grandmother had, so maybe they're going to like tie it into her heritage a bit more, and you know, whatever, cool. Like, I don't really have much of an opinion with that. I don't always necessarily think that's like, you know, I mean, I wasn't really into Mandarin. Hold on, what am I trying to say here? I wasn't into Shang-Chi and the Mandarin and the Ten Ring stuff, right? That's what I was trying to say. I was like, that's not even a movie. Like, you know, I wasn't into that, right? And sometimes when you have like the mythical item from like the family tree or whatever, like I tend to find that a little bit iffy at times, and I'm not super into it by a lot. Now, admittedly, the reason why I don't like it too much is because traditionally it was usually just a bunch of white people writing it, and it felt kind of exploitative. Obviously, that's not the case here, and it wasn't the case with Shang-Chi. But a lot of those tropes that I don't like about it are still kind of there. So I'm not like super like enthused by the mystical amulet passed down from grandmother. I'm not really. This is a personal thing. This is not objectively a bad thing. I just don't like those tropes. I don't like playing with those tropes. But as far as the actual application of using her powers goes, I'm okay with it because I get why they said, you know what, the stretching thing has never really looked good or not in some way silly or goofy. This will take that away. It'll stop it looking stupid, but it still gets to accomplish a lot of the same things. Arguably, it's a bit more generic, but I understand that creative choice. I understand the choice of wanting it to look its best and not wanting it to distract from anything else in the show. And you're at the risk of people saying, oh, look at how goofy this looks. Instead of talking about how great the casting is or talking about how great the characterization is. And those things should be talked about more than the power effects, right? They should be. Because those are the important things. They are more important. They just are. So, wise choice on that front. Like, as far as what they're going to do, I hope they keep it minimal. Like, I don't necessarily need to get a whole lot into the backstory of where this bracelet comes from or whatever. And maybe they want to go down that route. Maybe they've got a story they're passionate about and whatever. Like, that's for them. But I don't tend to be into those types of I don't know, MacGuffin is not the right word, but yeah. So yeah, it's interesting because I can't really talk about the plot all that much because there isn't really a plot yet. I mean, there's a plot for the characters, a plot of her wanting to go to this convention. I'm not saying that the episode's lacking a story. I'm saying typically we talk about superhero stuff, we see the signs early on of like, okay, this is what the story for the whole thing is going to be. This is the villain they're setting up, and that's just not there. And that may be wise, honestly. It may be wise to just wait an episode and just like focus on setting up your main character first. And they've given us a very living, breathing relationship between Kamala and her parents, and even her brother, who doesn't get as much. But the small bits we do get him are funny, and he does seem to like his little sister and sticks up for her a little bit. So you kind of get on board. And her friend Bruno, who might or might not become a love interest kind of thing, they have decent chemistry. He was not annoying. He's like a gadget guy. He makes things. In fact, he wanted to go dressed as Tony Stark. And this is maybe one of the more interesting things about having the MCU going this long, is that they can do stuff like this now where there's like younger characters. It was the same with Kate Bishop and Hawkeye, but we have this younger generation of in-universe, because at one point in the episode, Kamala looks at like drawings she did as a child, and she's like drew the Avengers, and it's like a 6-year-old's drawings. And when you think about the timeline, you're like, oh wait, actually this lines up, especially since with the 5-year gap from like Infinity War into Endgame. I think all the stuff right now is set in like 2024, I want to say, which obviously we're getting quite close to that now. But that means that if she's 16 in the show, which I think she said she was, then that means, if she drew these when she was like 5 or 6, that was like, that's after Avengers 1. That's 2014, maybe 2013. So, basically I feel old realizing that. So thanks for that show. But yeah, so I'm excited to see her get her proper costume. And some of the hijinks. I guess I'll give a mild spoiler warning just so I can talk about a couple of the things that amuse me and like how they showed certain things. So this is mildest of mild, but just in case you don't want anything. But in the middle montage when she's describing the plan to sneak out of the house to go to the Avengers Con, I love that the cosplay outfit she had in that was perfect. It's like they actually made a proper Captain Marvel suit that fitted her. That was, I would say it's up to the quality of the one in the movie that Carol Danvers wore, but it's much higher quality in her cosplay outfit. And she does this like fancy move where she jumps out the window and swings in the tree. And when she talks about them catching the bus, they like ride their bikes off a bridge and land on the roof of the bus like an action scene. But then you see it all really happen, and her outfit, well, does perfectly fine for a cosplay outfit that a teenager's made, is obviously nothing compared to the one in her vision. when she jumps out the window, the tree branch snaps and she falls. She's very clumsy, actually. There's a lot of that. I mean, the first thing we see of her in the episode is she goes for a driving test and immediately crashes the car into the driving instructor's car, which was Mr. Clark from Stranger Things in a small role. So nice to see him. But yeah, so those little stylistic touches give it a lot of personality, and those ones I thought were quite amusing. So I had fun with that. I had fun with the opening. I think it does a good job of like giving us a sense of the energy that it wants us to feel. When she starts narrating over her animated project at the start, it feels bubbly. It feels like it's full of life. Maybe it's just a bit more to my taste and say like because Moon Knight, like I only watched the first episode of Moon Knight and I praised some of the things that it did when it came to the interesting premise of the character's mental state and how it was playing with that. But a lot of the stuff for the opening was a lot more sort of traditional, like well, I would say traditional. That's maybe not fair, but it had a bit of the Mummy in it, but mixed with a bit of something else. Like it was definitely like a very specific vibe that it was going for. That I don't know if it necessarily jumped out to me as much. Whereas this, on the other hand, at least from episode 1, feels like a very, very good version of a teenager-led show. This feels like a very good version of a teenager in high school who's going to have powers. A genre that I, from time to time, I've been known to enjoy. Certain hit television show, for example, kind of my favorite of the bunch. But it's a very good example of what it is. Whereas a lot of these other Marvel shows, I feel, have been really kind of like middling versions of what they are. But let me know what you thought of Miss Marvel episode 1 in the comments below. Like, subscribe, ding the bell for notifications, all that stuff. Get me on the Twitters, at Wibble89 for me, or at mailed_fuzz if you want channel updates. You can support all the content in a couple of ways. You can hit the super thanks button underneath the video, and you can also, of course, go to patreon.com/mailfuzztv and give us as little as $1 per month and keep all the content on its way. Both on MailFuzz TV and on MailFuzz Movies, where all the movie podcasts live. So go and have a look over there as well, if you haven't. But that is me, so thank you once again for watching or listening. I always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any vanilla?